You're listening to Y.S.O.S, but playing the greatest hits all day long.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is your smart older sister, and we're going to talk about something that went viral last week, or depending on when I upload this, the other week. Anyway, so I was on a work break a few days ago at the time of recording when someone sent me this short video from TikTok about a girl crying over supposedly having to work from 9 to 5. This clip went viral, and having seen it, I do want to react to it because while I understand the outrage her video generated in some quarters, I think it's worth discussing what she actually brings up in her short video. I'm going to play her brief clip for you now, and then we're going to discuss, okay?
I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, but this is my first job, like my first 9 to 5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me fucking forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, fucking duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till, like, 6:15 earliest, and then, like, I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my god. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9 to 5 schedule in general is crazy. Being in the office 9 to 5, like if it was remote, you get off at 5 and you're home and everything's fine. But like I'm not home. It takes me long to get home, and like people that drive to the office, like you don't get off at 5. And I know it could be worse. I know I could be working longer, but like I literally get off, it's pitch black. Like I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like how do you have time to like meet like a guy? I don't know. Like how do you have time for like dating? Like I don't have time for anything, and I'm like so stressed out. And I'm also getting my period, so that's why I'm all emotional. But like, am I so dramatic? It's fine.
So, Brielle, I think that's her name. I think there are 5 points that we can take from that very short clip. She starts off by saying that she might be dramatic and sound annoying, and points out that it's her first 9 to 5 job after college, and she has a very long commute, having to leave at 7:30 a.m. and arriving home at about 6:15 p.m. She has no energy, no time for other things, and she believes that remote work is better. So let's take off from that first thing she said. So she seems to have an awareness about how she might come off. It's clear that she's not trying to make any political point, really. She's just expressing her emotions about the situation and cautioning us that it might be annoying to have to listen to her feelings. Her next point is that it's her first job after college, so I'm assuming she's pretty young and still adjusting to her work life. The feeling that she's expressing, I'm pretty sure we've all felt that at some point in our lives. I started working 30-ish hours a week when I was 18. When I went to law school, on top of studying, I still had to work similar hours, albeit admittedly not straight from 9 to 5, because of course I had to go to class. I was 21 years old when I went to law school, and with having to read literally thousands of pages a day, attend classes where 90% of the professors just delighted in shredding us, plus having to work in order to support myself, I definitely spent a fair chunk of time being miserable. We've all felt that feeling. I'm sure. We may not have cried on camera to strangers on the internet, but when she says,
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
deep down, you know what she means. Third, what she said about long commutes, I'm not sure if she was aware when she was saying it, but there have been actual studies showing how miserable long commutes make people. This has been consistently shown in study after study across nations and cultures. In 2018, researchers in Beijing found that if a commute was longer than 45 minutes, most people would either move closer to the job or actively look for different work. A study in the U.S. in 2019 found that longer commutes created more stress and fatigue. Another study, published in 2020, confirmed that longer commutes lowered both job satisfaction and the benefits from relaxation, increased physical strain, and resulted in poorer mental health. This is consistent with studies done in the UK, India, and elsewhere. One of my favorite studies is the one done by the University of West England, Bristol, which surveyed 26,000 people from 2009 to 2010 and then from 2014 to 2015, and found that a 20-minute increase in commute time was as damaging for participants as a 19% pay cut. And if that isn't an exclamation point enough, research has shown that most people will take a pay cut if it means a shorter commute. If you've spent any amount of time working in a big city, you know how brutal commutes can get. For most of my professional life, I worked in a metropolis of 14 million people. A few years into being a lawyer, I got a high-paying job where I had to get up at 4 a.m. and leave the house by 5:30 in order to reach my job at 8. I'd get home at about 1 a.m., sleep 3 hours, and do it all over again. After about 2 weeks of this, I wasn't just miserable, I was physically exhausted, and I found myself a teeny tiny apartment for an exorbitant amount of money just so that I could cut down my commute to half an hour in the mornings. My earnings were significantly decreased because while living in my own house meant I didn't have to pay rent, the exhaustion actually caused a cardiac incident for me. So I knew I wouldn't be able to withstand that commute arrangement long term. But earning thousands less in order to not have to commute for as long as I did was fine by me. It's like taking a pay cut for a shorter commute, which I know that most people would agree to under the same circumstances because, again, research has shown this. Fourth, now, while she didn't say the phrase work-life balance as far as I can tell, that's one of the points that she kind of raises in her clip. People make fun of work-life balance a lot. Especially in my industry, I can't tell you how many times senior attorneys have trashed people wanting more time for other stuff. It's taken for granted that you just get to work associates to the bone until they're just shuffling around like zombies. In most firms where I am, junior associates don't even get a fair percentage of the billable hours they've worked. So, for example, the minimum annually required for the two firms I worked at was anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 billable hours for junior associates, which I guess seems reasonable because that's about 8 to 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. The problem is, not all hours you work are actually billable. You can't bill your clients for time spent commuting or doing administrative or managerial work, and sometimes you can't even bill them for work done for your superiors at the firm. In my second year as a lawyer, some friends and I crunched the numbers and found that on average, we worked 80 hours a week or 320 hours a month and 3,840 hours annually. Most of that was billable, but honestly, when you're worked as hard as that, it's actually very difficult to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And as with most things, the more brilliant you are at work, the more you get saddled with work. Like the reward for good work is more and more work, which sounds like a good thing until you realize you haven't gone home in 3 days and you're just living at the office. Just to drive home this point, I'll give an example. A friend of mine managed to bill 400 hours 1 month as a junior associate. And I know what you're thinking, and I am sure he didn't fudge his numbers at all. His firm even checked to make sure. And it was amazing. He managed to bill 400 hours that month. So he was juggling 5 big cases and wasn't really sleeping beyond short naps at the office. He went home to shower, change clothes, but that was about the only amount of time he spent at his apartment. After closing a really big case that month, he was so burned out that instead of heading back to the office, he just went to the airport, nothing but his wallet and his phone, and booked a flight to his hometown. And he did not reemerge for 3 months. That's how horrible the burnout was. So, burnout, physical exhaustion, and its associated health issues, those are realities for lawyers who are worked very hard, and most of us are. And while it does amount to decent earnings for some, for young lawyers who are adjusting to the practice, to return to my earlier point, they actually get peanuts. So, that friend who billed 400 hours a month for his firm, if I recall correctly, the hourly rate for junior associates at his firm was about $50. So the firm billed his clients $50 an hour, so $20,000 that month for his work. But he was only paid $7,500, which was his monthly salary. He worked at a firm of about 300, maybe 400 lawyers, the bulk of them being junior associates, and despite having a system where clients were charged an hourly rate, my friend got the same pay as other junior associates who didn't work as many hours as he did. So, I don't know, for me, that's not a fair percentage considering how hard he was working himself, or rather, how hard he felt pressured to work because they were just giving him case after case after case. I realize that as lawyers, we generally make much better money than most people, but my point is that even among us who have it better, there's a real toxicity in the hours we are expected to put in. Many of us don't even really get to enjoy the money we earn because we're too tired and or eventually too ill. Even when we do get to spend it, for many of us, it goes to vices that actively harm us, but manage to make our grinding profession more bearable. Now, even before I was called to the bar, people in my profession were trying to change that culture. But there's this really nearly impenetrable core value, it feels, that you're not doing law right if you're not miserable. Like you won't be taken seriously if you're not on, running at 120 hours a day, 6.5 days a week. I remember a brilliant professor of mine who was also a partner at the firm I later worked at. She walked into class one day and spent about 15 minutes making fun of an associate who, at his exit interview, had complained that he couldn't stay on because the firm didn't have a work-life balance. Years later, when I left the firm, because I was recruited to do something for the government, I walked into the room for my exit interview and she said, "Oh, thank God, someone who isn't leaving because she's lazy." And the crazy thing is, I didn't see anything wrong with her statement at the time. I was just deeply relieved that I wasn't one of those spoiled losers crying about how hard work is, like I didn't just graduate from an elite law school that was meant to prepare me for this profession. I think for many people, particularly if you're mostly Asian like me, calling someone spoiled and lazy is about the worst thing you can say to them. Like you're so useless, you don't really contribute to your society or your community, and you have the nerve to cry about how having to work is hard. Now, I'll admit that when someone first sent me Brielle's TikTok, the first feeling I got at the end of seeing it was irritation. Even understanding that she was not making a political point, even crediting her for being aware that she might come off as super dramatic and annoying, I was still irked by the fact that she was complaining at all. Because I was very much brought up around ideas of being productive for the sake of your community, of not being afraid to put the R's in. So, my tendency whenever I have a chunk of free time is to fill it with something I think might help, and, crucially, keep my mouth shut the whole time. I know it sounds insane, but even when I was so overworked, I was so overloaded with work that I was sleeping 3, maybe 4 hours a night, sometimes at the office. I still did legal aid. I still volunteered in legal clinics and mentored at my law school. My gut reaction to any sort of complaining about work, even when it's understandable and warranted, is just, well, what do you think you're supposed to be doing? You sound like a spoiled, selfish brat. And because that's so visceral to me, so automatic to me to feel that, I don't outwardly react immediately whenever I encounter that. And that's why this reaction video took a few days, because I had to think about it and listen to her again and to hear what she was really saying. To be clear, I don't think complaining is good for you overall, and listening to someone complain is the absolute worst. An older study out of Stanford found that complaining for even half an hour a day shrinks the hippocampus, that part of the brain that does a lot for memory, learning, and critical thinking. We can kind of get that, right? When you're busy running your mouth and crying about something, you're not exactly finding solutions, right? What's worse is that complaining frequently rewires your brain so that you're more prone to complaining in the future. And in general, your thinking patterns become more negative. But just because we don't like complaining and complaining isn't good for us does not mean that the complaints aren't warranted. Sometimes complaints do indicate that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and in this particular case, I think there is one. If we're honest, even if Brielle's crying irked us, we shouldn't deny that she has a point. Her feelings are valid and she's making sense, even if we don't necessarily want to hear it. For example, and this is the fifth thing that I took from her TikTok, she says that things would be better if she had remote work options. Having remote work options is better. As early as 2017, when that UWE Bristol study about commuting was first published, participants were already extolling the joys of remote work. Most of the 26,000 people surveyed said that having remote work options was a huge draw for them when applying for a job. I can imagine that would only be heavily underscored now. One of the things I hope we learned from the pandemic is how to do things more efficiently. And honestly, in my current workplace, we don't have to show up at the office 5 days a week for a fixed amount of hours in order to do our very important jobs. Most people have started implementing the 4-day work week and or flexible hours that still amount to 35 to 40 hours of work a week. I have a friend who works 6 days a week, but because of the 2 days that she gets to work from home and one day is spent out in the field, she feels energized rather than burned out, which is what she felt when she was doing her 8 to 5, 5 days a week at the bank. Many of the law firms I know of now that refuse to change their toxic work culture are having trouble recruiting. And even other intense professions like medicine have started implementing changes to address lingering overwork issues. So, yes, change is in the air, at least in my corner of the world. And I think it's because a lot of people have gone through what Brielle has gone through and have felt what she felt. So, in conclusion, no, it's not bad to be mad or upset about having to work 9 to 5. It isn't inherently bad or lazy or spoiled to feel upset about losing your time because of work and its associated realities like commuting and mental fatigue. I think we should just collectively cut Brielle some slack and in our own lives try to find and implement solutions about the very real issues she brought up in her TikTok. And on that note, get back to work, kids. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to make you crazy if you let it. Again, this is not a singing channel. See you next time.